Shalom, welcome to Temple Talk, Israel National Radio. Today, the 10th day of the month of Tammuz, 5774, July 8th, 2014. This week, Parshat Pinchas, and we are 1 week away, exactly, from the beginning of the 3-week period of mourning for the Holy Temple, the day which begins those 3 weeks, the fast of Tammuz, 1 week from today. Well, we are a nation at war once again. We have Operation Protective Edge. There are hundreds of rockets that are falling into Israel. I'm confused already by the figures that I've seen. In the past week, it was 110, but then it was 40 just in the past few hours. Mm-hmm. Rocket warnings in more cities than ever before, in Ashdod and Ashkelon. Beersheba. Rockets actually falling in Beersheba. Alarms, sirens going off in Jerusalem yesterday, although it was a false alarm. Beit Shemesh, the Central Command has given an order that all communities that live within 40 kilometers of the border with Gaza have to conduct themselves accordingly. All children's activities, educational activities, have to be conducted in bomb shelters. So all the children's summer camp activities are in bomb shelters. Once again, the Pikud HaOref, the Central Command, has given directives that there cannot be gatherings of over 500 people in any of these communities. Israel is at war. The world is calling for restraint. As we go to the microphone today, our Prime Minister Netanyahu says that the time has come to take the gloves off and to deal with Hamas. Is that really going to happen? Who knows? In the meantime, within Israel, on fire, riots everywhere. Interestingly enough, not over the Green Line, not in Judea and Samaria where things sound relatively quiet, but here within the Green Line, our Arabs, the Israeli Arabs, are the ones that are rioting over the death of Muhammad Abu Khadir. We're going to be talking all about that. In fact, I'd like to begin by telling you that this is not going to be an easy broadcast for us, just as last week's wasn't easy. What is easy in this world? You know, we want to make some sense and some order about what's going on here. And there is so much to say and there's so much to consider. I'd like to start with a verse. The verse is in Lamentations, which we're going to be reading on the 9th day of Av. It's Lamentations 1 and verse 15. And it reads, "The Lord has trampled all my heroes in my midst. He proclaimed a set time against me to crush my young men. As in a winepress, the Lord has trodden the maiden daughter of Judah." And verse 16 continues, "Over these do I weep. My eye continuously runs with water, because a comforter to restore my soul is far from me. My children have become forlorn because the enemy has prevailed." From this verse, from these words that reads, "He proclaimed a set time against me to crush my young men," the sages of the Talmud make a statement based on this verse, and they state that the passing of young men, the death of young men, of Bachurim, is as great a tragedy as the destruction of the Holy Temple. And since this is Temple Talk, which is a project of the Temple Institute, and since you know exactly what we stand for the rebuilding of the Holy Temple, and need I remind you of that enigmatic statement that the sages make in the Midrash, that if only the nations of the world would have understood how important the Holy Temple is for them and what kind of harmony and peace it brings to the world, they not only wouldn't have destroyed it, but they would have surrounded it with armies and fortresses to make sure it would never be destroyed. I think I can say this is the beginning of our program today, because everything that we're going through really is about our lack of the Holy Temple, our lack of our connection with the Shekhinah, and all of the suffering that we're going through is part of the vacuum that we live in without the Holy Temple. So, where do we begin, Yitzchak? We're not talking anymore. Nobody's talking anymore about Ayal and Naphtali and Gilad. Hashem Yimkom Damav is the expression. The 3 boys that were abducted and murdered, presumably by Hamas terrorists who still are in hiding and haven't been found. And by the way, you need a very cooperative society to keep murderers hidden like that, because when it came to the alleged murderers of Muhammad Abu Khadir, Khadir, they were found very, very quickly because Israeli society is eschewing them. So what's going on here is that a Palestinian 16-year-old boy was brutally murdered. And that is very, very horrible. And we are aghast at such a thing. We were hoping in the very beginning that the speculation in some of the press was correct, that this must have been a setup, a blood libel, and that it was done by Arabs with perfect timing to be able to have a win-win situation where they'll be able to make it look as if there was a vengeance attack.
Or that it was a family honor killing, which is very prevalent, and in fact the same night
I'll get to
a young woman was killed outside of Hebron.
But in any event, as of this microphone today, on Tuesday, the 10th of Tammuz, July 8th, it seems that the likelihood is that this was a terrible aberration of wayward, violent Jewish youth who were not acting out of religious ideology, by the way, who don't represent the settler movement or any particular fanatical rabbis, like everybody would like to say, or anybody trying to exact vengeance, but rather they represent a particular strata of society which best can be described, again, if this is a bit early because it hasn't been completely substantiated yet, but it sounds like that they are a group, perhaps even families that are connected to a well-known subculture of soccer hooliganism, which is a terrible phenomenon that is recognized in many countries, and that we also have soccer hooligans, and that these kids actually did this horrible thing. As soon as it happened, to quote a headline in the Jerusalem Post, condemnations poured in from the entire world. And very, very quickly did these condemnations pour in, and very, very quickly did the Jewish people in Israel react with horror and disgust, and basically everybody clamored over themselves to condemn what they assumed must be a vengeance killing. Secretary of State Kerry, I'll never forget his words when he heard about this. He said immediately, "It sickens me to think of a 16-year-old boy that was plucked off the street away from his family and killed," something like that, which of course is exactly what happened to Ayal, Naphtali, and Gilad, but there was no quick condemnation, not even in those words, from the United States. And of course, as we pointed out last week, President Obama had nothing to say about the boys until their bodies were found. So let's get some order here, okay? Yitzchak, I think, can I speak for you? Let's speak for the two of ourselves. Let's speak for who we presume to be the people of Israel. This is absolutely a horrific thing to happen, and it cannot be justified. And murder is murder. There's no question about that we would never imply otherwise. What bothers me is the rush of pundits, jaded, cynical, manipulative journalists and politicians that are taking advantage of this situation to chastise Israel, that, you see, we have no moral high ground, we're no better, we've been too complacent, how could we have allowed such a phenomena to fester within our midst? I have wonderful, dedicated listeners, friends, followers who are writing to us in a tizzy. They don't know what to do with themselves. People writing saying, "Oh my God, what have we become? How could we live with ourselves? Oh my God, is this what we are? Are we murderers?" And to these people, I have only one thing to say. You know what? No, this is not what we've become. We're not murderers. There were Jewish murderers before in history. I suppose there may be again. Yes, this is a horrible thing that happened. But please, let me take some moral high ground here. It's not hard. It's not hard, okay? The mother of Naftali Frankel condemned this murder, and she consoled the mother, right?
While still in Avelut herself, in the 7 days of mourning.
And she's still as she's mourning, she condemned it. She said how horrible this is. But the mother of Muhammad Abu Khadir, she's calling for vengeance. Israeli society quickly eschewed this horrible cancer within our midst. Palestinian society giving out candies, celebrating Even Abbas's PA party, that is supposed to be our peace partners, made horrible cartoons and caricatures on their sites and on Facebook of these 3 unfortunate children that were murdered. But again, as Yitzchak started to mention, the very same morning, which was the morning after the funeral of our 3 boys, the very same morning that the body of Muhammad Abu Khadir was found, another body was found. Another Arab child's body was found, but you probably never heard of her. Her name was Omaima Jaradat, and she was murdered and abducted and murdered the same night that 16-year-old Muhammad Hussein Abu Khadir was abducted and murdered. And she made no headlines. And the State Department, Kerry, wasn't sickened. And you have no world press over it whatsoever. In fact, if you never heard of it, it's because the only places you could have heard about it is on some important Jewish blogs and the Jewish press, who have people working in Arabic to translate, because it was only mentioned in Palestinian Arabic sources. She was apparently murdered by her uncle. And this was an honor killing. And Arabs slaughter other Arabs constantly, especially their female relatives, who can count how many have been killed in Syria. And so this received absolutely no coverage whatsoever. And the point is, this is the emblematic of Arab society. Can you imagine what I'm trying to say? That the very same morning that Israel was plunged into a total existential dilemma, into the chaos of being, because we want to be everything that we can be, and we want to be a light to the nations, and the world holds us up to a different standard. What's that old joke? There's 3 standards, one for dictatorships, one for democracies, and one for Israel. And you know what? It's true. We should and do hold ourselves up to a different standard. But you never heard of Omaima Jaradat, because nobody's going to be talking about her, because who gives a damn about Arabs killing Arabs? But when a Jew kills an Arab, it's completely different. Okay? The same day, here again, I hope you've been following these news items, but you might not have been. The very same day that the police announced that they had arrested suspects, 6 Jewish youth, including several juveniles. Okay, and we don't know the story yet. We don't know. There's a couple of sources that have claimed exclusivity and anonymous insider information about soccer hooliganism and all sorts of things, but nothing's been announced formally yet. Okay, but the same morning that the police announced that they had arrested suspects in that murder, they also announced that they solved a murder that's 3 months old. And that was the murder of a 19-year-old girl named Shelly Dadon. She lived in Afula. She got into a taxi, and she was driving to a job interview, and she was murdered. Her body was found. She was found in Migdal HaEmek in a taxi, knifed to death. And it turns out, even though that it's very hard for the police to utter these words because they're afraid of unrest in the Arab sector, but the words that they are afraid to utter is that it seems that it was nationalistically motivated. But the punchline is that she was murdered by an Arab taxi driver, not from Shechem, not from Hebron, not from the occupied territories of Judea and Samaria. She was murdered by an Israeli Arab. An Israeli Arab named Hassan Yusuf Hassan Khalifa, who comes from a village called Ibelin in the Galilee, and that's the murderer. And on it goes, never mentioned. The point is, horrible what happened to Muhammad Abu Khadir, but let's remember who we are, and the very fact that these people that I mentioned that have written to us and that they're saying, how could this be? You know what? I said, that's exactly the point, that we're all so upset and we're beside ourselves and we're trying to figure out how it could be, because this is not at all the way you would expect the Jewish people to behave. But the fact is the problems go much, much, much deeper. Don't worry about what we've become. We haven't become anything. And again, don't misquote me, and I'm not going to give this disclaimer every 5 seconds with everything I say, saying, don't forget, I condemn it. I said I condemn it. But what do you think is going to happen to a people that are living under this amount of pressure, feeling completely abandoned, vulnerable by a government that prosecutes them for defending themselves by police that are brutally against the victims time and time again? We're living in a Kafkaesque situation where as soon as something like this happens, we've given all the nations of the world the excuse to say, oh, they're no better, and all the world is rushing to condemn. Just as right now, the Abbas of the PA is rushing to get the United Nations to condemn what Israel is doing, Israel's aggression, and how the world is so concerned that Israel should not, should exercise restraint. In the meantime, today, so far, just this morning, as we go to Mike, Israel has pounded at least 50 targets in Gaza, major counteroffensive, Operation Protective Edge. Hamas is threatening to target Tel Aviv. Abbas's party, right? The Palestinian Authority, the ones whom we are committed to make a two-state solution with, they issued a statement this morning that we should be preparing body bags. This is our peace partners, and in the meantime, Obama calling for restraint. This is a very dangerous escalation. Yeah, Yitzchak.
Yeah, I just have a little sidebar, Rabbi.
Okay.
This is really on a total different level, but the name of the operation, the military operation that the IDF is performing in Gaza in English is Protective Edge. That's what they're translating as. Actually, I heard earlier in the morning on Aretz Sheva and the Israel National News, they use the term in English solid rock, which I like much better. But in Hebrew, it's Tzok Eitan. And a tzok is like a cliff, the edge of a
exactly
sheer, deep ravine. And Eitan means strong. So I really, like Protective Edge sounds like, I don't know, like some kind of, underarm deodorant or something. It's like really, I don't like the translation. I just wanted to say that. I know it's a little bit irreverent.
Solid Rock it is. Operation Solid Rock. So Hamas, in the meantime, makes a video. It's on YouTube to scare the residents of Beersheba, telling them that they better flee because there's a death sentence on them. Hamas, in a crescendo of gall, says that they'll stop the rockets when we release terrorists. They want us to go through that all over again.
However, Rabbi, I'd just like to add, if people aren't aware of the fact that Hamas, with all their bravado, their border with Egypt has been cut off. Their tunnels have been sealed up from Egypt, as the Egyptian government now under Sisi is very anti-Hamas. And so whatever rockets they have in their arsenal, and they number in the tens of thousands, they're not going to be able to replace them. So with all their bravado, whatever they fire and whatever Israel's allowed to is able to destroy in this operation, they're not going to be able to replace, at least not in the near future, or maybe at all. So a lot of thunder and fury from their part, but they are definitely in a tight spot right now.
Israeli Arabs are on the rampage. Israeli Arab taxi driver murdered Shelley Dadon, Hashem Yinkum Dama. Israeli Arabs are empowered by the Knesset members who are the chief insiders against the Jewish people. Again, yesterday, in a radio interview, Arab member of Knesset Ahmed Tibi refuses to call the teens murderers terrorists. They are not terrorists, right? Khanin Zoabi, may God obliterate her and Tibi together on a slow boat to China. She and he, they're saying they're freedom fighters. He blames the government of Israel. They are not terrorists. And so we have these people sitting in the Knesset telling us that everything that is used against the Jewish people is completely legitimate, and they are at the same time empowered by all the Western politicians who, and I quote from another article, shed crocodile tears for the 3 murdered Israeli boys. It was Obama who finally said, after their bodies were found, he couldn't imagine the indescribable pain of their parents, but in the same breaths, he warns Israel that we have to restrain ourselves, that further self-defense measures could destabilize the region, and of course, it's Obama himself who is the main destabilizer by the rush that he made to recognize the newly Hamas-linked PA, and on it goes, and on it goes. So we're dealing with a society, a Palestinian society, which, as far as the West is concerned, they can kidnap and murder Israeli children with impunity. We're not allowed to even speak about their lies, their incitement, their anti-Semitism. Look at the Muslim world right now. Look at the savagery, the butchery that's engulfing the new caliphate. In all of this incredible sea of hell sits Israel, who with Jews who sanctify life, and all of these Muslims who glorify death. And while we have this tremendous outpouring of collective grief, while the mothers of the 3 boys condemned the revenge killing, the mother of this 16-year-old boy from Shuafat is calling for revenge, and of course the mother of one of the fugitives who is the alleged kidnappers and killers of the 3 boys, she says she's proud of him until her last day. And this is exactly what we are up against. It's barbaric. It's a psychotic enemy that is killing Jews with impunity, and this indifferent or even hostile world is looking the other way, and that is ultimately what we are up against, and nothing has changed in that regard.
One other piece in the puzzle, Rabbi, if I may add, before the first half of our show concludes, all the rioting that you mentioned inside of Israel, it has been suggested from more than one source that this rioting was, again, like many other times in our recent history, whether it was the first intifada, the second intifada, whatever, it was pre-planned, it was ready for an event that it could use in order to explode, and that it was basically organized by the Islamic movement in Israel, which is led by our nemesis, whose name I never get right, Raid Salah, who is the same, they're the same group, and he's the same personage, and they are linked, and this was proven by the Israel Security Services recently. They are linked to Hamas, and they fund the same horrible unrest and violent rioting on the Temple Mount that we have brought to you and talked about so many times over the past few weeks. We'll be right back.
We have a lot to share with you. Be right back. Temple Talk, Israel National Radio.
We got to the end of the music in any case. And secondly, we have a few seconds. Shalom and welcome back. Temple Talk, Israel National Radio, UniversalTorah.com, and also on the Temple Institute's own YouTube channel. Today, the 10th day of the month of Tammuz, 5774, as the Rabbi mentioned earlier, 1 week away from the 17th of Tammuz, which of course is a sunrise to sundown fast day, the beginning of the 3 weeks of mourning over the destruction and subsequent lack of rebuilding of the Holy Temple. And, usually, Rabbi, we're just saying that at this point in Tammuz, we're like already making ourselves crazy because we have been talking all about the 3 weeks and all about the destruction and all about how we can't just mourn the temple, we have to rebuild it, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But obviously, as you all know, we've been preoccupied with current disasters and tragedies,
but as I tried
which are all very unfortunately
related.
relate it to the month of Tammuz.
As I mentioned in the beginning, actually, we are talking about the destruction of the Holy Temple. That's what this is all about.
Right.
Every tragedy is a manifestation of the destruction of the temple, and it is happening because we are disconnected. But once again, oh my God, what's happened to us? Nothing has happened to us. So don't give me that. I'm so sick to death of all of these leftists and even rabbis that are falling over themselves and writing about how we're too complacent. We're not complacent at all. I don't know anybody who's complacent. Every moment of life here in Israel is totally on edge. It's totally given over to self-improvement and introspection. It's impossible to live here for a moment and not constantly be what we call working on yourself to become a better person. How did this happen? You know what? It's happened before. It happens. It's not our society. Look at society. Like Yitzchak was mentioning to me the other day, you know, that the murderers of Ayal and Naphtali and Gilad are still at large. That in itself shows you that there are more operatives involved. How did two people disappear completely if it hadn't been planned so well in advance? How do they completely disappear? They have so much help on the ground, right? The mother says, "I'm proud of him to my last day." Do you understand what's going on here in a society that is giving out candy and gloating and gleeful over the murder of Jews? And the difference between that society and our society, where within 24 hours they already had suspects under arrest, or a little bit more, because it's impossible for Israeli society to hold something like that down. It's impossible for it to be part of Israeli society. Yes, it's a terrible tragedy that it happened, but I assure you that nothing happened to us. We are the same healthy people. This is a manifestation of the generation that we're living in. That's exactly what this is, and it's a terrible shame. But you know what? The Jewish people are not known for this type of behavior. That's exactly why there's so much breastfeeding and there's so much sincere introspection, because this is not supposed to happen. Even though there is a concept in the Torah of vengeance, and I have to please don't misquote me and listen very, very carefully, because I'm really bent out of shape about this. One of the things that really bothers me is rabbis who are writing and blogging and speaking and being interviewed and saying that vengeance is not the Jewish way. First of all, you can say that because it sounds very nice and egalitarian and democratic or whatever, but the problem is that as soon as you open the Bible, you find out that it is the Jewish way. But that's not the point here. And again, careful now, don't have the audacity to misquote me, because this murder of this 16-year-old innocent boy, Muhammad Abu Khadir, is not vengeance, it's murder. And it's a horrible, horrible thing. What I call vengeance, though, in the Torah would be to put to death the murderers of the three boys. That is a Torah obligation, to banish their families, to destroy their homes. And you know what? Everybody that talks about the fact that this is not the Jewish way, very big problem in next week's Torah portion of Matot, in chapter 31 and verse 1, where it's time to wage war against the Midianites because of what they did to the Jewish people with their daughters, using them as a weapon to bring the Jewish people away from the God of Israel. So there in Matot chapter 31, we find the following. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, "Take vengeance for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterwards you shall be gathered to your people." And the next verse reads, Moshe spoke to the people saying, "Arm men from amongst yourselves for the legion, that they may be against Midian, to inflict Hashem's vengeance against Midian." So this is strange, because when Hashem said the mitzvah to Moshe, he said, "Take vengeance for the children of Israel." But when Moshe said it over, he said, "Inflict Hashem's vengeance." So comes along Rashi and explains, it's because whoever comes to stand against Israel, it's as if they're standing against the Holy One, blessed be He Himself. And ain't that the truth, and isn't that always the truth? But again, all I'm saying is, I wouldn't have said anything were it not for the fact that you have these people that are just so ready to self-immolate with no belief whatsoever in the righteousness of their own path, that they have to say, "What have we become? We're not people who take vengeance." You know what? You're right. You're really right. We don't. We don't. And vengeance here means to stand up for the Jewish people, not to pluck an innocent Arab child and kill him, but to destroy the murderers in our midst. And if we would do that, then you wouldn't have the aberrations like the soccer hooligans who did this, if we would feel that we are acting in the way that Jews are supposed to act. Because there certainly is such a thing, and that's exactly what it is. And that's all there is to it about that. In the meantime, look at the society. Like I said, look at what we had been reporting about for months, for weeks, about the horrible Valkyries on the Temple Mount with their 3 fingers, and about the gloating, and about the cartoons that they made of the 3 boys depicted as 3 rats on a string, and about Abbas even now his organization saying that we should be preparing body bags, and about Chavrei Knesset like Zoabi and Tibi who say that the murderers of Ayal and Gilad and Naphtali were not terrorists at all. And speaking about Hanin Zoabi, who is this Arab woman Knesset member, we mentioned to you already that she has a nephew or a cousin, and his name is Muhammad. And he is a really cool kid, very, very young man. He's apparently living in hiding now because his own relatives have threatened to murder him. And you can be his friend or at least his follower on Facebook, Mohammed Zoabi, Zoabi. And there, for example, go way down on his Facebook page and find his answer to an Arab who called for his kidnap and rape. I can't read it to you exactly because it's a family program, and I can't say the words exactly that Muhammad Zabi answered to this Arab who said that he should be kidnapped and raped for standing up for the Jewish people. But suffice it to say that Muhammad Zabi is a very sharp card, and he ended his answer to this Arab by saying, "You better hide in one of your holes. Guess why? Because our IDF is collecting scumbags like you." And he signs it, Am Yisrael Chai, Muhammad Zoabi. So you never know. But the point is, what we have right now is we have all hell breaking loose across Israel. I was in the north a couple of days ago, and I had to take a bus from Safed, from Tzfat to Jerusalem, the 982, and that very line, the night before, that bus, the windows had been completely broken out and firebombed with Molotov cocktails, and it was a miracle that no one was killed, which, by the way, speaking of God and miracles, there's like hundreds of missiles that are falling, and it is quite a miracle so far, thank God, that nobody has been killed, because all of these attacks against the Jewish people, which are attacks against the God of Israel, are supposed to be killing us. This is what they're doing. This is what they do. They're trying to kill us. Where's the world? Where's the UN? How would you feel like living? Okay, if you live in Chicago, I understand, because there were like 60 shooting deaths over the weekend. I understand. But let's say you live in a nice, suburbia. How would you feel about Canada, for example, raining missiles down on you? You got neighbors to the north, of course, in the south, on the Mexican border, you've got other problems. I understand that too. But the fact is, this is how we live, and it's par for the course. You tell us to give back Gush Katif. You tell us to exile 10,000 Jews, and their synagogues are destroyed, and their graves are disinterred, and their homes are bulldozed, and the Garden of Eden that brought you bug-free vegetables and scientific and agricultural and technological advancements is plowed over, like Zion is plowed into a field, Jeremiah says. And now their missiles are reaching, like nobody told them that would happen, right? Beersheba and Ashdod and Ashkelon, and they're threatening Tel Aviv. And you know what? Where's the world when hundreds of missiles have fallen on us in the past 24 hours? But you're going to see them reacting now because we should be exercising restraint, and because we're escalating, and because we're going to plunge the region into turmoil. Get it? The region, which is like the advancing caliphate that they just issued, by the way, their own passport of ISIS, and the only hope for humanity, for the image of man in this entire region is Israel, and we are the whole problem, because you can't say that they are doing anything wrong. This is just how it goes. That's why nobody's going to condemn the fact that this girl was murdered by her uncle in Hebron the same morning as this boy was murdered, because she was murdered it was a family thing. Listen, she dishonored them somehow. Who knows? This is what happens. the fact is, again, I just have to point out how much we learned from the mothers of these boys, from their incredible behavior, and the fathers, how much the Jewish people were united and learned these staggering life lessons, and how even as they're getting up from their 7 days of mourning, the mothers send a message of condolence to the mother of Muhammad Khadir, and how that mother is calling for vengeance. And so what's going on now inside Israel? Not inside Yehuda and Shomron, inside of Israel. Again, that road that I described to you, the bus number 982. This is going past the area called the Triangle, right? All the large Arab population centers. They're rampaging. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. They're destroying property. They're trying to kill as best as possible. Look what's going on in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, with the light rail, owned by the company called City Pass, millions of dollars of damage has been inflicted on the light rail. The Arabs have destroyed the stations, the train stations in their areas. The train service between Mount Scopus and Pisgat Zev has been discontinued. It's impossible. And Yitzchak is telling me they're not just burning the stations down. They are taking these industrial
saws.
strength, like a contractor uses, these electric discs that you use to cut concrete. And they're standing there, and they're cutting the train lines, and they're cutting the columns, the
Things
pillars
that take hours to
that
do.
hold up the wires for the train, and they're cutting into the tracks. This is like cool and calculated. They're standing there, and they are just like the rise of the Planet of the Apes. They are destroying everything. It's so well timed. They have been waiting for this moment, right? It's understood that an Arab child was found, unfortunately, killed by aberrant Jews who have to be totally shunned by Israeli society. And so it's understood that they are going to go on a rampage and call for the death of every Jew and inflict as much damage as possible, so that they have attacked couples in the old city. They are attacking tourists. They are throwing firebombs. They are doing everything they possibly can do to inflict as much damage as possible. Because how dare you Jews think that an Arab child will be killed and that the world will not suffer from it, and that we will not destroy all of you because of it? Tell me something again. Pardon me if I sound highfalutin. I'm really not trying to be holier than thou. I really am just totally amazed. That's all it is. Did you think ever? I mean, what kind of a joke would it be for someone to even imply or infer that would be the behavior of the Jewish people over the death of our children? I mean, what you saw over those 18 days was an unparalleled period of incredible unity, prayers, crying out to God, massive prayer rallies of tens of thousands of people. You didn't see anybody in the country that wasn't wildly affected emotionally and intellectually. You saw things that you never saw in your life, that kind of unity. Did you see Jewish people going into Arab villages and calling for vengeance? Did you see them destroying the train line? Did you see them one Molotov cocktail? Did you see any of this? No. And certainly did you see Jewish women Valkyries holding up their fingers and giving out trays of sweets to passerbys in celebration of the death of an Arab child? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? So all the people that are saying, how could this have happened? You know what? It happened because, unfortunately, we are really in some trouble here. And we're at war. And I hope that we can heal. And I know that we can heal. But don't worry, because there is plenty of moral high ground. And this is exactly what has to be clarified here.
Moving right along, Rabbi?
Please.
Moving right along, but also, of course, connected. I'd just like to report the situation in the past week on the Temple Mount, because also coinciding with all these events that the Rabbi has been talking about is, of course, the beginning of the month of Ramadan for the Muslim population here. And the month of Ramadan involves, among many other things, large numbers of Arabs, Muslims, going to the Temple Mount each day And in recent years, that has inspired the police to close off the Mount to Jews, because if there's so many Muslims, how can we possibly consider bringing small groups of Jews up to the Temple Mount? For no justification, by the way. And of course, Jews have rights as well to be present on and pray in the Temple Mount each and every day. This year, and again, we're just into the second week now of Ramadan, and this year, of course, Ramadan has been accompanied by all this violence and tension. And I guess on the first day of Ramadan, the first weekday of Ramadan, because I think it began on Shabbat, Jews did go up. I think maybe you were among that group, and since then they were letting maybe a group go up very early in the morning for a very short period of time, and then closing it off to Jews. And then I think there are a couple of days toward the end of last week where no Jews were allowed at all, and of course there was, to be sure, there was tremendous tension and violence in the air. This week, however, again, the policy was to let Jews go up for a limited amount of time, a limited amount of Jews. But this morning, apparently, the police are limiting the numbers and ages of the Muslims on the Mount, and are granting access to Jews. That's
I hope to be up tomorrow morning, God willing.
That's the latest. So,
I left a couple of things out, Yitzchak, that I really have to fill in, okay? I wanted to mention also that Arab rioters in Shechem have once again firebombed Joseph's tomb.
Of course.
I wanted to mention that, as was reported on Arutz Sheva for the third time, a Nazi flag is raised over an Arab village on an important highway, which is not far from the place that the three boys were kidnapped. I wanted to mention this other incredible story that a boy, a young fellow, an American citizen, Tariq Khadir, was from Tampa, Florida, who was a cousin of the murdered Arab teenager Muhammad al-Qadir. He came to visit family, and he's an American citizen, and he took part in a riot in the Arab neighborhood of Shuafat in Jerusalem, not far from my home. And a grainy video circulating on social media appears to show police beating him, or a youth, in the neighborhood. And the Justice Ministry is investigating American complaints. The State Department is extremely concerned, deeply concerned, over the alleged beating of an American citizen taking part in violent riots in Jerusalem. So this boy, Tariq Khadir, who was apparently pummeled by police, what most of the stories are not reporting is that he was ra'ul panim. That means that his face was covered with a kafia in the tradition of the youths who take part in these riots. He was ra'ul panim, and he was wielding a slingshot like all the other finest of the cream of the crop of the Arab youth. And of course, the intention of all the people that are participating in the Arab riots is to kill, and rocks do kill, and sometimes they really do. And so the State Department is up in arms over the alleged beating of a United States citizen. The United States citizen is an Arab youth who was willfully taking part in a pogrom against Jewish passerby.
Can I add something, Rabbi? This just in. I'm just now looking at a report that's just come out on Israel National News. Apparently, there was a radio interview today that involved both Shmuel Shai Cohen, the grandfather of Gilad Sha'ar, Zichrono Livracha, who was one of the three boys murdered, and he was being interviewed, as was the father of Muhammad Abu Qadir. And while the grandfather of Gilad Cohen condemned the murder of the Muhammad Qadir, and said that type of action, that type of murder and vengeance is not something that Jewish people condone in any means. When asked to give a response, the father of Muhammad Abu Qadir denied that Hamas was behind the murders. He said, nobody knows, you're making it up. And again,
I saw an even more ridiculous headline where one of the relatives said, maybe Jews did it. You see, Jews did this. Jews could kill an Arab boy. Maybe Jews killed your three Jewish boys.
So even when given a chance to rise above their own sordid social behavior, they fail to do so. Given a chance to shine, to say something, to reach out in any way. Prime Minister Netanyahu and the President Peres and literally hundreds of Jews have called and visited this Arab family for condolences. And then the Arab family actually denied that Netanyahu made the call, even though it was well documented.
Yitzchak, the bottom line,
yeah.
You don't judge a society by the crimes of a few. You judge a society by the way that society deals with its criminals and who it celebrates as its heroes. And any attempt to make any equivalency or moral symmetry between Israeli and Palestinian societies is absolutely obscene. And the fact is, we don't have to be defensive, and we're certainly not forgiving of the horrible, inexcusable kidnapping and murder of the young Arab boy. We still need to say loud and clear that comparisons that place Israeli and Palestinian societies on the same moral plane are evilly intended, and they are simply not true. And that is the bottom line. So Israel is going to be dealing with this trauma, and it is a major trauma for us. But we are not a nation of murderers. We are a nation that is suffering under the tremendous stranglehold of an evil force. And I hope that we really will, as Netanyahu said now, take the gloves off and not show any restraint, but really do the right thing, because we are at war, and that is all there is to it.
So, thank you very much for being with us this Temple Talk. Hopefully next week we'll have more positive things to report. Of course, it will be the 17th of Tammuz, fast day next week, when we do our next Temple Talk. Again, Rabbi, let's all hope for Besorot Tovot, good news, positive news, and may we really take the gloves off and make a difference. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.